So, have you ever used something and thought, who designed this? Did everyone actually think about the human using it? So, that's the problem we're solving today. Because when art and engineering don't talk to each other, we get products, systems, and even leadership decisions that technically work, but they don't truly connect. And so today we're talking about how empathy and contextual awareness change everything. Wayne Lee is here, and he's a professor at Georgia Institute of Technology and the author of Design Empathy and Contextual Awareness. And he does exactly that. He blends art, science, and human behavior, and today we're unpacking why that matters. Wayne, it's so good to have you here. Thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks, Lisa. Happy to be here. It's a privilege.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm super curious. So, why do these highly intelligent teams build things that people struggle to use?
Well, listen, I mean, if you think about very, very large companies and the way sometimes they're organized and the way they communicate, I can definitely empathize. I've been there. I've worked for very, very large companies, and sometimes you have very highly trained people, but they're highly trained in perhaps one discipline, and then they're housed in a single department or only responsible for one type of thing. So when it comes to trying to marry or bridge the things like you're talking about, art and science, technology and humanity, business, as far as like cost and optimization and distribution, those things, all those things have to marry together in a way that makes sense. So a lot of times it's really poor communication, and then it's also really poor, um, what I would consider shepherding of the management, right? Trying to make sure that the customer stays front of mind as you make decisions that help polish and move that product to production.
Right. So, where do you think the breakdown usually happens? Is it in the leadership, engineering, design, research? Where do you think it breaks down?
Yeah, but well, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of places where it can break down, right? Obviously, management's one of them. If you as a company, when companies are small, they're nimble. Usually, all the different departments are all in the same room, right? Like I've been in a couple different startups of my life, and when you only have 40 employees, guess what? You're all on the same floor, you're in the same building, you talk to each other all the time. So, but as your company grows and it grows bigger and bigger and bigger, now you've got specialties. You've got the marketing department, you've got the design or basically the artistic department, the design department, you have the engineering department, the programming department, the customer service. And now all those departments are in their own buildings, and they're not actually don't really have an incentive to kind of try to either walk across the room or even just ping each other on the IM, right? They don't really want to or need to. And so, depending how the company's set up, that's a problem, right? Now, the other part is personal. If you, as a person, perhaps studied computer science for 4 to 8 years, and then all through high school really didn't talk to any of the people who were in the art program or the music program, like those types of mentalities fossilize over time. And so, if you didn't develop or try to develop that other appreciation or that other understanding, then again, that now it's not just the fault of the organization, it's the fault of the workers. If you don't reach out and try to reach out to people and understand where they're coming from, then it's very, very easy to just stay in your lane and then just work the way you do. And
Yeah.
that also causes issues because if the culture of the company is truly multidisciplinary, like and really wants to actually learn about other types of ways of looking at a problem, then the management gets easier, right? You don't have to force that. It's just part of the culture itself. So it's a little bit of both, right? And that's really key. It's about hiring people when you're the manager and really looking for that diversity of perspective and thought, right? And also when you actually now manage the groups, how you're able to look at your development process and how you're able to kind of coach those departments when you have an organization that large, to work together to facilitate that issue, to facilitate getting right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, when you talk about contextual awareness, what does that mean in simple terms?
Yeah. So for contextual awareness, I think for everyone and again, I think everyone is a little D designer out there, right? Like I always say in my book, it's like if you make eggs for your roommate in the morning, you're an ACD, you're an avian culinary designer, right? So like now, whether or not you go to school like the cordon bleu and then study for 4 years on how to make a good omelet, that makes you a capital ACD designer, right? And then what makes you a great Michelin chef is if you were to serve omelets in such a way with such diligence and practice that people paid a $500 a plate for it, and you're a three-star Michelin chef. Now you're a professional ACD designer, right? So
Right.
let's think about that from a contextual standpoint. Contextual awareness is understanding when you make something, and everyone makes something, right? Something, some service, some experience. Again, like I said, everyone's a designer in that sense. When you make something, you need to understand the environment in which it is produced, the the context or the interaction of the customer utilizing or the user, or they call the user in computer language, the user of the design. And then you need to understand the methods of production, the means of production. So all of those are is understanding of context. So it's being locally aware, it's being globally aware, and it's being having a sense of an understanding that things are made differently in different places, right?
Hmm.
You wouldn't make, you wouldn't make a cell phone the same way in Asia as you would do in Africa, right? For example, right? So it is because the methods of production are different. And then people use things differently. So you wouldn't
Right.
use the cell phone the same way one-handed on a train on a busy subway car than you would at home on your couch. So again,
Right.
that's the understanding of how does the context, how does the environment or the situation shift how I look at how people use things, and how I produce them.
Yeah, that's making me really think because I'm thinking about like a company that's all across the world trying to create a product that is universal for anyone in the world and how challenging that actually is.
Yeah. I've definitely
Wow.
been there. Yeah, I've definitely been there with automobiles, right? Because I used to work at Ford and Volkswagen. And so, there are some parts where you think, okay, well, and they call that homologation, right? They're like, a car made for Europe with narrower streets, more expensive gasoline, it's going to be smaller. It's going to be, its fuel efficiency, it'll use much, much smaller engines to get better fuel efficiency. Whereas in America, where the roads are very wide, the parking is plentiful, the land is great, then yeah, big giant SUVs and trucks will abound because you have to cover so much ground and usually haul a ton of stuff, right?
Yeah.
Because you're moving things a lot, so it becomes a little bit more utilitarian in that sense. Um, so I think part of that is for large companies is figuring out, okay, well, what are the common when you set up a vehicle architecture, for example, um, what are the common things that you can commonize across the globe? What are the things
Yeah.
that are universal? Now, where someone touches, smells, hears, sees something, you probably can't make that universal. So you have to start thinking about, well, in car land, they call that the difference between a class A surface and a class B surface. What you can see,
Mm.
feel, touch, that's class A surface. The spark plug is not a class A surface, right? You don't normally touch a spark plug unless you're a mechanic. So in that sense,
Right.
that's the class B component. That's not a class A component. Whereas a steering wheel, you see it, you touch it, you feel it. That's a class A component. So you
Hmm.
might start at least breaking it down and saying, well, can I reuse all these spark plugs all over the world? Probably, because if it's a combustion engine, the spark plugs aren't going to change, and that kind of stuff. Yeah, are the battery cells a class A department? No, probably not. They're class B. So in that
Right.
sense, you could probably reuse batteries for an electric vehicle. And so when you start looking at global supply chain, you do think about those types of ideas. Now, the sheet metal, the steering wheel, the shift gear, the instrument dials. Well, now those do need to be culturally specific. So
True. Yeah.
so yeah, so you're optimizing. You want to think about what is the best experience you can give to someone, while at the same time balancing the cost of making that special and unique. So that's contextual awareness. And if designers, creators can get an understanding of that, it'll make the choices they make at the very earliest stages of design easier for them down the road.
Yeah. Can you think of a product that technically works but misses the human experience?
Well, listen, I don't want to cast aspersions on any particular company. I did notice I want to say about, I think 3 or 4 years back, um, it was an interesting one because listen, AI is a really hot topic right now. Everybody loves
Oh yeah.
AI. Everybody's like, again, this is the thing with technology, right? People get enamored with technology and then they just try to apply it to everything, right? And
Mm.
so that's the issue with not really thinking from a empathetic or human-centric way. When you start going, well, that's a hot technology. it's got to be groundbreaking because they hear it in the media, they hear it in all places. They don't even bother to ask, does somebody actually want this? They just try to shoehorn it into everything that can possibly do that, right? So, and that's usually when it's the hammer looking for a nail syndrome, right? I've invented a
Mm,
brand new hammer. Now let's go look for nails. And like, that's an issue when you didn't actually talk to the person who wants to use the hammer. If you're like, hey, I talked to this person and it's a father who wants to build a treehouse for their kid, that's why they're using the hammer. Well, that's a little bit different than the construction worker making a 40 floor high rise. So
yeah.
back to your question on the product, I noticed a couple years back, I think Samsung created a new dish clothes washer, like a washer dryer combination. And
Okay.
I think they were reacting to perhaps a machine that they had before. A machine they had before, I think, had like maybe it was 2020, maybe 2017. And then what product I'm thinking of was probably around 2023 or maybe 2022. Um, the product they had before had like rows of buttons, just rows of buttons, like five rows, seven, so 35 buttons to use this washer dryer. Like most people figure out how a washer dryer is without having to have an instruction manual, right? Like so you would just put your clothes in, turn the dial, hit the go.
Yeah.
But if you had to decide between 35 simultaneous buttons, that's probably a tough call. So,
Yeah.
so Samsung probably so on the reverse side, they're like, listen, that 35 button row thing was probably because they had so many features. They could do so many things with their washer dryer. They're like, well, we should have a button for every single thing we could potentially do, which was kind of like,
Yeah.
that kind of idea. And so, it confused a lot of people. So then they reacted to that most likely. And then so they created one with just one button on it. And it's just like
Mm.
one giant button in the middle of the screen of the panel with the word AI on the next to it, like AI powered. So every time you wash, you just hit the AI button, right? And that's it, right? So now that makes it dead simple to use. But
Totally.
again, did anybody ask whether or not you wanted a, an electronics company that makes home appliances to take all your laundry data? Like,
Right.
do you want Samsung to know that you wash your underwear on Friday nights? Like, why is that important? Like what
Right.
what's the point of that? Um, because what it's very probably doing is it's like measuring this like if it's making all decisions for you. Colors or whites, dirty or clean. Do you want to like, spin dry this or air dry this? Like it's making all those choices and then feeding it to the cloud or feeding it to the company. And so like I personally don't want Samsung to know that I wash my underwear on Friday nights. Like I don't want them to know that. Like I don't want them to know when the tidy whities go
They'd
in.
be so confused with my schedule. They're like, when does this girl don't do her laundry? Because I
Right.
don't
Well, and
have
that's the other
one.
part about too. Guess how long you have to take it before it feeds the neural network. Like think about how long
Yeah.
it takes for it to learn your behavior. You know, that means it's gonna do your laundry like 150 times poorly before it gets it right, right? Or it has to compare your laundry habits with another person who bought the machine.
Yeah.
So at a certain point, it's feeding in a
Oh my
model
God.
that,
Yeah. That's crazy.
and
Yeah.
that's nuts. Like, and that's just nuts, right? Why do you need AI in a washer dryer?
Hmm.
Right? It's not, you could have just simplified your interface and made it easier for someone to use and still given them the control that they would like,
Hmm.
right? And respect their privacy. So in that sense, I think that's something where, yes, can you put AI in that? Sure you can. Is it
Hmm.
right to put AI in that? I don't know. I don't know, right? And
Yeah.
I probably would have thought, maybe I should have talked to some people who do laundry before I made that, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing that because you're a car guy, one of my first cars that I ever had, I went to change the light bulb because the light bulb burnt out, and I had a hard time accessing the part in the car where I had to change the bulb. Like it was
Yeah.
like way too small. So
Yeah.
that to me was a miss.
Yeah.
It's like, why would you create something that made it so difficult to change the light, like something so simple? And
Yeah.
so it did turn out that you were supposed to like take out a part. I don't know. I'm not a car girl. I can't talk technically about it. But you're supposed to take off this front panel and change it that way. But I was like, why? That's so difficult to do. And I
Yeah.
would have to take that into a shop or have someone else do that for me. Right.
Yeah.
So to me, that was a design flaw miss because
Yeah.
it shouldn't be that complicated to change a light bulb in a car when your lights burn out all the time.
Yeah. No, listen, Lisa, I completely agree with. I mean, listen, this is always what makes it fun and difficult, right? Because that decision, I bet, having been on the car side of it, is you're right. I mean, cars, there's a whole movement in design called the right to repair movement, right? And so, um, much more prevalent in Europe than say America, but at the same time, there is something to be said about that. If you think about it from a sustainability standpoint and about an environmental standpoint, you don't want to plan obsolescence in your vehicle, right? You want to
Hmm.
be able to maintain it. And you're right, light bulbs burn out. Like they burn out after about 3 to 5 years, right? Just if you depending on how much you drive at night, but they will eventually burn out. They will wear out. So how easy do you make that? Now, if the company, if the car company has a strong dealer network and they've got certain things in place, and the dealers are like, hey, we've got to earn money here, right? We do
Hmm.
oil changes and radiators and da 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 da. We've got to have another avenue of money. Then they're going to make it hard on purpose so to force you to go into the dealership for them to swap the light bulb out, right? And
Yeah.
that might be part of it, right? Um, Whereas I think, it'd be intriguing if there was a car company brand out there that was actually like, you know what we'll do is we'll try to, and again, some of this is regulated. So this goes back to contextual awareness. If the laws in the country dictate that you cannot have a dealership and a manufacturer, right? That they must be separated. In America,
Okay.
dealerships and manufacturers must be separate. Like the original equipment manufacturer must go through dealers, and that was established like decades ago. That was established long time ago, right? That was the 20th century. Um, so the dealer networks then have a lot of power over how the OEM can design the vehicle if the dealers aren't making enough money, right? But it'd be intriguing to start a new company to say, okay, well, listen, or even just a new brand within a company to say, listen, we're all about the DIY movement. And so what we really want to do is bring that back, that simplicity of repair. Vehicles in the 1950s, like, yeah, you could get into the hood, you could take the car apart, you could take the engine apart relatively, if you're mechanically inclined, relatively easily. But compared to today's cars that have so many electronics in it, it's almost impossible to do
Totally.
so, right?
Yeah.
But if just as like what you're talking about, it would be fun just to like, okay, well, what are the things that most people need to do, right? Oil changes, maybe a radiator flush. If you're a gas car, if you're an electric car, it's probably even less, right? You know, the um, yeah, the air filter, washer fluid, steering fluid, bulbs, just the main things that you think normally would wear out, right? Brakes
Yeah.
and tires. If you just say, listen, look, we're not gonna, we realize if it's really a serious issue, like the engine computer dies, yeah, you're not switching that out. But at the same time, if it's something where it's like you said, a bulb or a brake job or even just flush, oil change, it'd be nice if they made those things a lot easier, right?
Mhm. Yeah, almost like a Lego type car, like an easy to repair.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Maybe,
mean,
maybe they'll go with that.
yeah, that would be great. I think the modular concept would be amazing because, um, you know, I, I, I think it was, yeah, I mean, I think there have been concept cars in the past that have tried to make modular vehicles. And to be fair, the OEMs do a lot of that to reuse parts, like we were talking about before.
So, Wayne, you wrote design, empathy, and contextual awareness. So, what does design empathy mean beyond the buzzword?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is always one was always a little bit tricky, right? Because I think people, yeah, empathy is a buzzword, and a lot of people tend to utilize it. So I think for my science, it's looking at empathy in a way as if you were to, how would you apply it, right? How would you actually understand it? And there's two thoughts here, right? One is just kind of a holistic way of looking at not only yourself but the way you approach your work, right? So, being empathetic means understanding, or at least on the cognitive side, meaning that you understand other people's perspectives, right? So there are three types of empathy, right? There's cognitive, emotional, and compassionate concern. And so that's just a straight up definition of empathy, right? That's not the design empathy part. But if you think about being able to understand where other people are coming from, that means you have to understand where you're coming from. So in that sense, do you tend to favor, and I write about this in the book, do you tend to favor a more analytical approach? Are you more of a creative person? When you were growing up, did you like artistic subjects? Did you like analytic, more math and science subjects? And part of this is of empathy is this holistic idea of to be truly empathetic, try to also encourage that kind of thinking in yourself, right? So,
Mhm.
everyone has the potential to be artistic, everyone has the potential to be analytical, right? These are networks in the brain that we all possess. It's not that like, oh, I was never meant to be creative. Like I hear that a lot with people who just say, oh, I was never creative. Like, well, no, you had bad teachers who basically
Mm.
told you you weren't creative or slapped your hand when you did something creative and they didn't want that at that time, right?
Right.
So
They wanted
so
you to
so
follow the instructions.
yeah, yeah, it comes out of the Lego movie, right? Did you follow the instructions and or not?
Yes.
And so I think part of
I don't know
that,
why
like you
IKEA
said,
furniture comes to mind when you say
yeah,
that.
no, well, and they designed that to be the simplest possible that you could follow, right? So, um, yeah, but I think like you said that. So we think if we think about design empathy, we're thinking about when you're trying to create something for someone. Can you understand their perspective? Can you understand where they're coming from without judgment, right? Can you emotionally connect with them as if their emotions were contagious? If they're frustrated, can you feel their frustration? Now,
Hmm.
both cognitive and emotional, you must possess. But you can't have that in such an abundance of one or the other without a balance, right? If you're too kind of like, oh, I know exactly what you're going through, it can almost feel like it's cold and calculating. And if you're emotional in this so much so, like if someone sprains their ankle and you feel their pain, but you feel it so much so that you start crying along with them, then it's going to be a little bit difficult for you to create something to help solve the issue, right? So
Right.
that's where the compassionate concern comes in, is holding this in balance such that you can still be a productive person and work through the issue without it being too, without one or the other being overwhelming, right? So that's really what it means is to be able to think about all these three components in a way that makes sense and in a way
Hmm.
that helps inform you. And so part of that is, can you imagine? Yeah, I mean, I've read in my book about using method acting techniques, right? Can you imagine an experience in your life that gets you into an emotional state? Similar, right? It's not a substitute for, but similar to what this person that you're designing for is experiencing, right? How are you able to do that? So, um, I think is fun.
Yeah, that defines it for sure. I often see, like when I'm sending out surveys for things like in my
Yeah.
own life, and I'm not really selling a product, but I often see that when I observe human behavior, it's a lot different than what people think that they want.
Yeah.
So is that a thing? Like, why is the observation of human behavior often more revealing than asking people what they want and having them tell you? Because it's
Yeah.
almost like they don't know what they want. They think
Yeah.
they do, but then you watch them and they're doing something completely different.
Yeah. No, I talk about this with my students a lot, and you've really hit it on the head, right? So here's the thing. There's one, bad testing of products, right? So there's one, like if you go to a customer focus group, they're going to pay you $200. Then you
Hmm.
just really want it for an hour and a half, 2 hours of your time. Probably what you're going to do is you're just like, all right, you're gonna start reading between the lines of what the researcher looks for, and just like, I just want to tell you exactly what you want to hear so I can get out of here and then collect my
Right?
money, right? So in that sense, you're not really getting an honest and valid type of idea. The other one, of course, is when customers are frustrated with a product, that doesn't necessarily give them the skills to design a better product, right?
Hmm.
That's why you go to school to design for, right? You know if something tastes bad, but if I asked you, like we would go back to the omelet exercise and say, hey, could you design a better omelet? And then the question is, or could you make this pastry? If you know what it tastes bad, but you can't actually make a better pastry necessarily, right? So in that sense, customers can intone, they can think and feel a way about something. And that's valid. Like those opinions are valid, right? So
Hmm.
now the question is, how do you actually get to the root of that? And
Right.
and it comes to in the course I teach, we call that accessing the implicit.
Hmm.
Accessing the implicit goes beyond what someone just says. You can understand their psychology by looking at the differences in what we call intentional states. Between when someone says something versus when they do something, or they're conflicted. Have you ever done something but said the opposite? Or have you ever felt a certain way but it resulted in an action that wasn't exactly the same. Like telling a little white lie is usually something like that, right?
Right.
Um, so in that sense, when customers respond to a product, whether or not they're telling you a white lie because they know they're getting paid, or when you're actually just in the field with them, right? Paying attention to when they may say one thing but do the opposite, or when they show a behavior that makes you think, that's surprising. I didn't know that. Then that's something that you would probably want to pay attention to. But handing a customer a pen and saying, design this car for me because you know how to design a car,
Right.
that's not going to work, right? They're going to be able to go, oh, that's where I think, like you were mentioning, someone is all people have always used a quote with me because they used to work with Ford. They said, well, how about Henry Ford's quote of, if I just asked people what they wanted, they'd say a faster horse. And so the question, of course, is those weren't engineers, those weren't inventors that they were asking. But there was truth behind their words. When they say I want a faster horse, that actually means they want a more convenient, hassle-free way to travel, quicker, right? You just have to
Right.
empathize with what they want. And so if you can share empathy with them, because they are not themselves mechanical engineers or inventors, they won't make the car themselves. It's up to the designer who's skilled or trained to be able to build that object or service or public policy that then, any kind of experience that then just that addresses where that customer is coming from. And that's
Yeah.
usually what can make you successful because if you're able to access the implicit, right? What is unspoken? What is hidden? What is the meaning behind the feelings and the thoughts they have? Not what they say, but what they think or feel or do. Then you are accessing something.
Right. Do you feel like empathy can be trained inside technical teams?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't be teaching the courses I do without. And I've got, 15, 20 years of experience of students coming back and saying, that's like my hidden superpower. Like
Okay.
people come back and go, I have now graduated from university. I'm in these large teams. And I remember what you said, and now they start using the technique in the team. Like, okay, I'm a designer. Maybe they're a user experience designer. They're designing the front end of the software. And instead of just like really quickly, taking sides, like, oh, that software engineer in front of me, the coder over there, he or she's just the computer programmer. They don't really, instead of going, oh, wait, why is this person keep on giving me beef? What is going
Hmm.
on? Right. And so they empathize more and they begin to understand, oh, wait, okay, what I'm drawing, there's something that's technically challenging about what they do. Let me empathize with that and see why it's technically challenging. If they just take that extra step to empathize with someone across from them and realize that there are different disciplinary knowledges on these multifunctional teams. They begin to understand, okay, well, tell me why the coding works the way it does. Then
Hmm.
that informs them and makes them a better designer, right? Because then they draw something that can be built easier, right? Um, so it's those types of things that are always interesting, right? And so absolutely it can be taught. Everyone has this. I mean, it is, it's a network in the brain. It's a part of the brain that they use. And so, like, again, when you think about holistic thinking, holistic living, are you using the creative, kind of positive emotional attractor network in the brain? Are you using a more critical, analytical thinking area of the brain? Or are you using the more empathetic, like the more compassionate area of the brain? And those are just different areas.
Right. Right. So empathy then is basically a strategic advantage when it comes
Oh,
to this
absolutely.
type of thing.
Yeah. Not only is it strategic in the sense of building better teams, which, like getting along with your teammates better, finding a more emotional center such that you emotionally center around the customer, right?
Hmm.
That obviously already starts giving you a competitive advantage for the,
Yeah.
business service product, whatever you want. It already gives you a competitive advantage because you are doing things that customer now it surprises and delights them. They didn't even know they wanted it until after they see it.
I was
And then,
just thinking that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's like sometimes I buy something and I'm like, oh, who knew I would really appreciate the feel of this, whatever it is, leather, I'm
Yeah,
thinking of steering wheel on my hands, right? Like
yeah,
I never would have thought that
yeah,
that would be so important to me. And so being able to read through that and connect with human behavior, yeah, so powerful. I love
yeah,
that.
yeah,
So you embody both the engineering and design. So why do we typically separate those
yeah.
two worlds culturally?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think this is funny, right? Because I do, you're right, I do straddle it. And it's tricky. I mean, I think one, I credit my parents. I'm the son of immigrant parents from Taiwan, and my mom was a classically trained brush painter, right? And seamstress. She made clothes, she painted. My dad was a PhD polymer chemist, so he was definitely on the science side. Immigrated in through New York, and then wound up working for a chemical. He studied chemical engineering, so wound up making 40, 50 patents for the chemical company he was working for, right? That was plastics were a big thing back then, and then 50s, 60s, and 70s, and it was understanding how chemicals can be utilized in the petrochemical industry to make new materials. So that for him, that was both creative and very technical at the same time. So I can
Right.
see where they got and he loved theater and he loved music. So it was really interesting to have parents that got each other in that way and were able to kind of imbibe that interest in me,
Mhm.
right? Really loving the artistic side, the creative side, kind of the emotional side of expression, and then the kind of the analytical side of like, how does every little decision you make to make that creative thing contribute to how someone perceives it and
Mhm.
analyzing it, breaking it down, right? So I think in that sense, it was beautiful. Now, your question was, why does that separated? And I listen, there's a lot of reasons why it might be. One thing is it's going to be schooling, right? The teachers aren't encouraged to like have poetry and physics work together, right?
Right.
So in that sense, you know, you're not going to you're not going to have courses that try to do that. On the reverse side of it, um, because that happens now social structures start happening. You don't see teachers lead by example. So then you're like, well, that's the arty people, and then they now all of a sudden they have to have their own little social identity in school. Oh, those are the math
Right.
nerds. Now that and so they were, establishing a schooling culture and this is kind of why I'm an educator, right? Establishing a culture that glorifies and celebrates the diversity in mindset and mentality across those disciplines is this is what I was brought to Georgia Tech for. It was what my graduate studies were for. This is what design thinking was about. It was all about understanding how to meld radical collaboration across disciplines. And that's really important in our schooling. I mean, and not just the collegiate level. We're talking at the elementary to middle school, like elementary middle school level to make that happen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm picturing all the cliques that's in my high school right now, how everyone was separated. And oh, there's the artsy group, there's the really smart group, there's
Yeah.
um what else was there? Like music, and then the geography people.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you never thought of one person as like fully dynamic, but we're
Yeah.
all so dynamic. It's
Yeah.
just so interesting how that was kind of driven into us culturally that we're really good at one thing, or people put us into a box based
Hmm.
on
That's right.
what really, right? Like, so what happens to innovation when those aesthetics and mechanics evolve together?
Yeah. No, I mean, I've definitely have been on project teams where they have, right? And so when they do work in collaboration in tandem with each other, you get some amazing things, right? You get amazing things. So I mean, I can think some of the earliest examples I remember is listening to it was on a YouTube, it was on a video that was recorded, right? But even talking about how Steve Jobs looked at the operating system of the original Macintosh and saying how
Mm,
the lettering should be beautiful. It should be like a typesetter, right? It should be like calligraphy. And at that time, at the dot matrix screens, everything kind of looks like, your LED matrix where everything looks like a little figure eight, right? So even all your letters are in a figure eight British flag pattern. And so, he said, no, 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 no. Like it should actually be as if it was handwritten, if as if it was someone had written it in calligraphic style, where the G actually goes below the baseline. And and at that time, all the letters didn't do that. So you can see when someone insists that the technology be humanized, that it be relatable as if a person was using it from the very beginning. It changes how
Mm,
people look at things. You can look at the Macintosh as one of the very first humanized computers. But prior to that, it was all line prompt and it was computer facing, not human facing. So
right.
those types of products do exist. They exist when they demand that the engineering team and the design, UX, UI, artistic team um, work together to conceptualize and refine that product as it goes.
Right. Yeah, amazing. So Wayne, I'd love to move beyond products because
Sure.
most people listening aren't designing cars like you're designing cars, and but what they are designing is careers and relationships and
Yeah.
teams, right? So
Sure.
how does contextual awareness apply to leadership?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is so fun too, because when I think about this, one of these, think about this. Like I mentioned with kind of the omelet example, you're designing your career, you're designing your
Mhm.
life, right?
Yeah,
You're making something. It doesn't have to be a widget, right? Now the question is, what's the thing? If it's like, well, I want to design my career, okay, let's empathize first. What are you about? What do you want? Okay. And then so if you see, and let's also interview other people. So if you say, oh, I see myself 5 years from now being an architect. Okay. You do want to design your career trajectory. Who would you need to talk to? Who would you need to empathize with to understand what it's like to be an architect? You probably want to talk to an architect. You probably want to talk to
yeah,
someone involved with that. So who would you know, a mentor, a friend of a friend, that you could spend an hour on a coffee with to get a sense of, well, what did you do? Oh, well, what was that like? What was challenging? What was not? Just first talking and understanding about people. If you've got to create like I think about it was Valentine's Day 2 days ago. If you have to create a beautiful Valentine's Day dinner slash experience for your partner or your spouse, what do you think you have to go through to get that done? Do you just make something up and try your best? Well, that's probably not a good idea, right? If
right,
have you at least talked to that partner or spouse and try to understand what it is that gets them excited? What like maybe reminisce about how you first met. Try to understand what was that. Were they attracted to you in the first place? Now
right,
you've got those ideas. Great. Now move into the creative phase. So that was the empathetic phase. Now create. What are all the 15 to 20 different ways you can make that happen? For the architect, if you had to draw up a 3 year or 5 year career plan, oh, I'm going to go to school in architecture. I'm going to get an internship. I'm going to try to talk to these four other architecture firms. Da, 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 da. What are the things you would make to help test your theories on how well you could become an architect? What are the 4 or 5 different date slash dinner experiences you can think rattle off in your head that you think would be great for your partner or your spouse, right? So then start
yeah,
creating those plans. And now don't just choose one, test it. It might be something where you would send a text to your spouse or partner and say, I've got 4 different options here. Give me the super happy face emoji for the one you think you like the best.
right,
Right? And if you did that
yeah,
before Valentine's Day, that would probably guarantee you success. For the
hmm,
architect, it might be something where you might create what would be considered an architecture portfolio and go, okay,
right,
well, let me take this back to my mentor. So I created some projects, I worked on some scale models and some drawings. Um, and now let me go back to that mentor. Maybe it's, a friend of a friend. So, oh yeah, my dad's uncle's next door neighbor, or, my uncle's next door neighbor. He's an architect. Well, let me show him my model. Let me show him my portfolio and ask him, is this what architects do? Is this good enough? What would it require? And then if that person gave you critique, now you know how to be better. And then you just keep repeating because every time you test, you learn something new and you start gaining more empathy for that area of study or that area of life. And that
right,
enriches your human experience. So part of that is just really knowing how well to key in on that and how to practice. And that's what I call it. It's called a design process, but it's living life in a way that is effective, right? By utilizing those mentalities. When you test, you're being critical. You're trying to think, what part of it did you like the best? What could I improve? Now you're being critical, right? Using critical thinking. when you have something that you can test with. So those are all those types of ways in which you could do that.
Yeah, it's like having a full holistic mind when it comes to every decision you make in life.
And knowing when to use it, right? And that's the thing, right? If you work only from a creative phase, well, when it comes to having something, you don't, it's difficult then to actually ascertain what resonates the most. You have to have a
Right.
critical mindset. But then once you have, and then of course, if you have no emotional empathy and if you have no empathy, then yeah, you're going to be off. You're going to be wrong in the first place. But let's say you have emotional empathy, but you dogmatically, critically look at one idea at a time sequentially, because you're only thinking critically, not creatively. Well, that will also doom you to fail. Why? Because you're testing one idea at a time sequentially. You will never cover the gamut of what's capable if you don't have a creative mind to give yourself a lot of different ideas quickly. So again, knowing when to use each phase, each mindset is really important, right? But it is whole and switching back and forth quickly is one of those ideas. But you really, really have to be holistic in how you approach things.
So, Wayne, what do you think in terms of skills? What skills are going to matter the most
Mhm.
within the next 10 years? Because the
Yeah.
world is changing so much we talked about AI a bit earlier. Yeah, what skills are going to matter the most?
Yeah. I mean, listen, AI is it is a cool technology. It is a wonderful burgeoning technology, right? It's nascent. But if you still look at what AI can and cannot do, right? The skills that what AI will free us to do is it'll free us to look at context and the human condition in a unique way, right? If you ask AI, what's the first president of the United States? That's easy. It'll do it. But if you ask AI to do something like something contextual, it may not know. It's the neural network's not
Mhm.
strong enough. The data's not trained well enough. It takes too long for that to happen. So, so in that sense, what your skill sets are and what AI cannot produce. For example, if you're being sarcastic, AI doesn't know that, right?
Yeah,
If you type in capital lowercase, as some people do when they are intoning sarcasm, and your neural network large language model isn't capital or case specific, it won't know you're being sarcastic. It doesn't even know that humans are sarcastic in that way. It just reads
right.
the words, right? That's what a large language model may not even understand sarcasm. So in that sense, right, what you're really trying to understand is when humans relate to each other in a ways that are unique, specific to culture, specific to context, then those are like what are the skills that help you do that? Then there's the
Hmm.
creative skill, right? Because it's very difficult necessarily to program an AI to take leaps of faith. They can do what's within bounds, but leaps of faith, um, creative inspiration about combining multiple disparate sources of information and letting your brain kind of noodle on that and your emotional creative centers brain like think about that both consciously and subconsciously. Those types of things pop up and those are much harder to replicate, much harder to
Right.
replicate. So in that sense, I think you mentioned what skills, your empathy skill, you're able to understanding of being able to access the implicit, getting context from the sides, right? Being especially edge cases and not the normal, like the most common cases, edge cases. And then creative, like glorifying the idea of being playful, being improvisational. Those types of skills will not be replicated by computers, not anytime soon.
Yeah, 100%. So if someone listening wants to, take away two or three things that they can start doing this week to start developing stronger contextual awareness, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Lisa. So I mean, I usually talk about a couple of things. One thing that makes contextual awareness is interesting is to ridge, and also I mean, and empathy as well, right? Is really living richly. Now, when I say richly, I don't mean that you have to travel halfway around the world. Like it's not financially richly, though. Obviously, traveling to a different country does help you. But eh, living richly means that you try to explore the human condition that you're not familiar with. They
Mm,
may be eating in a restaurant that's not in your neighborhood. That might be going to a different part of town and offering, and talking to constituents there. That might be um, going to a food bank, right? And volunteering service at your local Rotary Club or your local food bank or a Goodwill. Um, that's one where I say live richly, right? The other one is see the meta, see the like, if you see the context. When you're given a situation, most people react just first blush, first face off, and then they just react to whatever it is they're doing, right? They don't take the time to slow down and say, why did that happen? What was it about it? Were there hidden forces at work? And so, for example, if you're at university, people would just say, well, why are you here? Well, I just need to pass this exam. I just need to pass this exam. No, 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 no. Take a step back. Slow down. Why are you even taking the class? Well, to graduate, to get an A. Why are you going to need to get an A? To graduate. Why do you want to graduate? To be able to do something else, something with that degree that I hold. And so in that sense, see the meta, see the contextual. Take a step back. If you're, a middle manager and you're like, I just need a change. Okay,
Yeah.
well, yeah, you resign tomorrow, but you first might want to ask before you resign tomorrow to say, hey, wait a minute, why am I unhappy about this? What's going on? What are the factors here? And then it may be, again, taking that design exploration, it may be that you don't need to quit. It just may be that you want more responsibility, or you want a different type of team underneath you, or you want a different product you're responsible for to manage. So, by just slowing down a little bit and seeing the meta context behind it, and then working through that planning structure, working through that creative structure, going back to say your supervisor and saying, "Hey, look, I'm just not really this project. I'm not as happy as I think I could do a good job here. But there's something that's I need either another resource, I need something else, or I want to shift." And maybe that supervisor, you know what? I think I've got a better project for you anyway. You don't even
Right.
know that it existed until you try, and so you've got to at least venture forth. And maybe it could be something like, I've got a plan to improve this product pipeline. Here's what my plan is, and then they say, you know what? That's an awesome plan. We'll have someone else help you with that. And that changes your entire condition. Or at the same time, we'll bring this other manager to handle that. We'll take your plan. Thank you. Hey, here's a different product for you entirely. So there are ways in which you can shift your world without, necessarily blowing it all up. But at the same time, it also means you're in control of it. You have to remember you're you it, to use a human-centered design process, you're navigating a ship with fellow navigators. You're not by
Mhm.
yourself if you have empathy. If you have empathy, you're navigating the world as a team of people, never as an individual. And so that's
Mhm.
what's interesting about it.
Yeah, I mean, I wholeheartedly agree with what you're saying in terms of like getting clear on what it is that you want, right? Like in our fast-paced world, it's so easy to get distracted by all the outside noise, and actually taking a second and sitting in stillness and thinking and getting clear on those things is so important because so often humans make these rapid fire decisions, I mean, how fun are rapid fire questions, but at the same time when you make a decision without thinking about it, sometimes down the road, you're like, oh man, I really should have thought that through.
Yeah, yeah,
We're all in a rush to get things done and to move things forward. So those, quiet times I find are so powerful.
yeah. It is one of those things where I know that a lot of times, I mean, I know that a lot of people are starting journaling, right? Like, I've always had a
Yeah.
sketchbook with me ever since I was pretty much 15. I've always kept a sketchbook, whether it be analog or digital. And even it is just those 5 minutes before you go to sleep, just write down some stuff that happened that day or how you're feeling about it. You'd be surprised how much then going back after maybe a week or two, maybe you've been frustrated for a couple weeks about something. But then going back to that journal and looking at it and going, and then like I said before, seeing the meta of like, okay, I've been writing about this for 3 or 4 days now. Do I see a pattern of something? Oh, wait a minute, there might be something there. And then that helps you identify it, and then it'll help you address it. So just journaling a little bit, writing down thoughts and feelings, um, and also factually what happened that day, sure. But like you said, exactly, right? Spending a little bit of those quiet, reflective times allows you to not make a knee-jerk reaction, all right? Because
Mhm.
those are definitely times the things like the knee-jerk reactions, are usually the ones that you would regret later down the road, right? Because you didn't think it through. And part of it, like in business, definitely, like I've definitely worked with clients in, Fortune 500 companies. They call that the jump to solve complex, especially if you're
Right.
executive, like somebody in a very high leadership position. You are paid to make decisions authoritatively and quickly. That is usually the pressure you feel as someone in a C-suite. The hard part about that is the more and more you lean into that because of the social pressure, the stakeholder and shareholder pressure, the likelier, higher likelier chance you're going to make a mistake. And so being able to at least have the courage to be able to go, wait, hold on. Let's consult back with the team. Let's talk with some customers. Let's try to understand what's going on before I just go, yep, let's just do that. And then that is usually what can, and especially at that level of power, um, can really doom a company or doom a product.
Yeah, for sure. So, Wade, it's been so much fun talking to you. Thank you so much. For those
Sure.
who don't know, there was a fire alarm, so we had to like reconvene, and we're getting this done. I love it so much. Tell everyone more about the work that you do.
Sure, absolutely. And again, thanks, Lisa, for this opportunity and for the time with you. It's always a wonderful pleasure to talk with you. So yeah, for people who are interested in more about this philosophy on how to kind of think creatively, think richly, and empathetically, there's the book that I work on that I published called Design, Empathy, and Contextual Awareness. You can look it up on Amazon. My last name is Lee, spelled Li. My research work is at the Georgia Institute of Technology, and we're always interested in companies, nonprofits, artistic groups from all over. When we focus in the Southeast, but we have clients nationally and internationally that like to work with us, right? To work on projects, either community engagement, understanding customers, working with students to help design new ideas for you. So those are always things that are fun in research. My research is usually in services, products, automotive, home goods, all those types of things. We've done a ton of things for technology companies as well. So if you're interested in working with us, happy to field it. You can find my contact information at Georgia Tech's website or at the lab that I run called Design Block without the K. It's DESIGNBLOC.godtech.edu, and you can get my contact info through that. Um, but those are ones we'd love to. If you're a Georgia Tech alum and you're interested in this, and we always love hearing back from our alumni. So please reach out and let us know how you'd like to get involved with us. We would love to be able to see where you're at, what you're doing, and how perhaps the teachings that we've taught now over a decade and a half now have helped inform your life. So we'd love to stay connected.
Amazing. So, if today's conversation changed how you think, that's the point. So, design isn't decoration, engineering isn't enough, and empathy isn't optional. So, whether you're building products, teams, or your own next chapter, understanding context changes outcomes. So, if you'd like to learn more about Wayne's work or his book, Design, Empathy, and Contextual Awareness, which is right here behind my shoulder, we will include everything in the show notes. So the future won't be built by specialists working alone. It'll be built by thinkers who understand this whole entire system. So Wayne, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate the time. Wonderful conversation. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned for the next episode. Until next time.